This is
Hour
three.
three.
This is
It's hour three.
Okay.
We'll get it.
Okay, Jackass. Tell me about Jackass.
Jackass was fell out of. We found some videotapes from this sort of skateboard surfer culture down in San Diego area, Southern California, somewhere. I can't remember. Johnny Knoxville. He was involved with Spike Jonze, who we knew from the music video world. And everybody thought this would be an interesting thing if we could pool it out into a show, which of course we did, and it was. It was a big hit. Went on to make several movies. They just did one in 3D this summer. So another enduring kind of adolescent male thing. We always got a lot of heat for it because they were always doing some ungodly actor or another. But a seminal classic show in retrospect.
So what did you think of it? Were you amused, outraged? I mean, when you first saw it.
I loved it. I thought it would be. I thought it was great. You know, I thought it was so silly and so over the top and so hilarious. Of course, the feeling was, well, what if people try to do these things? Is it responsible to put this on television? And we determined that it was. And we put enough warnings up in front of it. There was a couple of incidents, and we didn't put everything on that they did. It was, a carefully constructed show. But got a lot of heat for MTV, and it was part of that great creative phase that was happening in the 90s and late 80s.
The MTV Movie Awards, was that a natural progression from the Video Music Awards?
Yeah, well, Doug Herzog once again came in and said, we've had such success with the MTV Video Music Awards, we're pretty good producers. And the thing brings in $25, $30, $40 million in a night. There's an opportunity, if we listen to our advertisers, the major category of which was the movie studios, because we were like a bullseye to the heart of the movie-going audience. There's an opportunity in May and June, just as the summer movie season opens up, we actually can make the summer movie season a season and use those words. That this will be the place where you'll get the previews of what's coming up this summer, and we'll give awards for the prior year. So we'll trail well after the Oscars and all that, and this will be the MTV version of the Oscars. So it's not going to be necessarily, always the best picture, but best kiss, best fight, best car chase, those kinds of categories. Make it fun. Do as a send-up. And we started small at a hangar in Santa Monica Airport, and gradually it became $5, $10, $15, $20 million a year business. More than that, it brought in a whole other galaxy of stars. People would fight to be on it after a while. We get every big star in Hollywood. Every time that happened, of course, it just validates MTV further as a sort of centerpiece in the popular culture. So that was a good venture, and they created a lot of great shows. It was always fun to go to the movie awards. Excuse me.
It feels like almost like the anti-Oscars. Was that actually a thought?
That was the idea. We were going to be. Look, there were so many other movie shows award shows about the movies. Let's do the MTV version. So let's do the MTV version of a soap opera. Was the real word. Let's the MTV version of a movie award show would be, a lot of gags, and then we got into running these pre-produced bits, openers that Joel Gallen would do, and everybody in Hollywood would fight to be on the movie awards.
And if I'm not mistaken, the pre-produced bits were like putting the actors into other things. That started on MTV, not the Oscars, right? They borrowed the same guy, Troy Miller, to do those?
Yeah, they used to use them. We did those kind of send-ups and satires. They became a real signature of our award shows. Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of successful shows that have been launched under the MTV Network's banner. Any huge failures that you remember, or something you really said, wow, this was a real misstep?
Yeah, we had a bunch of those where we'd like in the animation area, we had a bunch of guys we had a show about a bunch of guys who lived in the woods in Norway or Sweden or something. The Something Brothers. I put this out of my mind, I can't remember the name. The Grunt Brothers, that was it. We thought that would be huge. It was over the top, sort of in the Jackass spirit. It was a total flop. We had a couple of animated shows that kind of checked out and were good from an animation standpoint, but didn't work. So there was a lot of disappointments. One of the great things, though, about being in that business was, we could take bets, and if it didn't work, it wasn't like we were making some feature film, or not even like we were producing some scripted network sitcom or drama. If it didn't work, you just threw it away, and then we'll just move on. But we tried to say, we had to take risks, and there used to be an old axiom in TV that most of the TV that you create will fail. We had a lower standard for success, so that wasn't necessarily the case. So we had a pretty good batting average, but we had our share of failures, and they would be embarrassing because some of the times you'd try and introduce a show with a big drum roll, but not everything played out.
When MTV Films started up in 1996, what was the idea for the types of films you were looking to do under that banner?
Films that would appeal to that audience, would somehow reflect MTV's spirit and attitude, and we could be players in the film business. And I'll tell you how it started was we put Beavis and Butthead on the air, the first show. This was back in the early 90s. And it aired, I think, it aired on a Friday night, and on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock LA time, I got a call at home from David Geffen, who was running Geffen Records, pretty hands-on at the time. We had a good relationship. We did a lot of things with David. And he said, I just saw that Beavis and Butthead. That's just, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Let's make a movie. Now, you got to say, he has a reputation for really being on it, but I mean, this show's aired once. He watched it. I want to make a movie. I said, okay, let's make a movie. I'm new to the movie business, what a movie deal looks like, this and that. And it was going to be at Warner Brothers where he had a deal. And then in the middle of this, we want to go ahead and make the movie. And in the middle of this, Viacom acquires Paramount. So now we're in a whole thing where the people at Paramount say, hey, you can't be making a movie with David Geffen and Paramount. And Warner Brothers. We're we're the people at MTV. We don't care really what studio's making the movie. We want to make this movie and get it out there. So that was a good introduction to how complicated the movie business could be and how difficult it would be. And while we did make a lot of movies and they made a lot of money, not a lot of that money would accrue to MTV. And there was understandable friction about it, because if you were at the movie studio, you had to green light a movie. You're putting down the negative, and the P&A costs could be, we basically were lower cost movies, still could be 20, 30, 40 million dollars. So what right do we have at MTV to be making changes or green lighting movies or talking about the marketing? And it's supposed to be collaborative, and it was, but it was always a bit, a bit testy. But we did create Varsity Blues. We made a lot of movies that were pretty successful. We had a lot on the Nickelodeon front, the same thing. But what I found out was that the movie business was nothing compared to the television business in terms of the economic benefits. That the movie business, people would get, and you know this, you live in Hollywood, people are attracted to the movie business like moths to a flame. Everyone wants to work on movies. Everybody wants to help out. Everybody's got an idea. The fact of the matter is, a complicated business, very low margins, doesn't pay much. The effort you put in is nothing compared to what you can put into creating a TV series, owning it and selling it internationally. There's no comparison. So in many ways, it was a creative diversion with very little economic benefits. There was some to Viacom, the company, that's true, but we probably could have expended more efforts on our television business.
How did Total Request Live come about, TRL?
I can remember we were looking for a studio. We said it'd be great, MTV needs a live studio. So we would go around looking in Manhattan. And we looked at a couple of places. There were some places along Bryant Park that would be reconstructed. And I remember coming back one afternoon with Judy McGrath and the guy who ran facilities. And we were across from our building at 1550 Broadway. I look up to the second floor, and you could see it's being used as an HR office, huge windows. It was a larger than normal ceiling capacity. And someone said, well, why don't we just put a studio in our building there? Look, we got this great spot, and we got like our human relations in there. So we decided we would convert that into a studio, do Total Request Live, and that was the real engine for MTV in the 90s, the second half of the 90s and into the 21st century. It was really a place to go and be seen, and it would attract crowds every day. You'd always hear the roar up in your office, and it became a huge hit. Live. It was the first time we really went live on a regular basis.
Was there any inspiration or connection to the fact that kind of Dick Clark, American Bandstand, was kind of waning, and I remember, it sort of faltered and then it sort of disappeared, and it seems like it dovetailed almost with the success of TRL.
Well, that was probably coincidental. We just knew countdown shows were successful.
Yeah.
If we wanted to play music videos in the daytime and bang them out, playing the hits, and then we said, well, like, how do we institutionalize that into a strip in the afternoon? Let's just do it live, get guests, beat a lot of drums around it. I don't think anyone was really thinking Dick Clark is in some kind of eclipse.
Yeah. What was the basic concept originally? Just to have live guests show up, or just
we're going to do
viewers?
viewers count down. What do you think is the best video of the day? So we would get thousands of calls. This is before email, of course. And then email, of course, factored in. So we would do that, and there would, of course, be the suspense. What's going to be, it was sort of run the Dick Clark model, that's for sure. What's going to be the top video of the day? And here comes so-and-so to introduce their new single. And, people would traipse down to 45th Street.
And imagine an artist really lining up to be on that show.
Oh, yeah, it was a big place to go.
What about taking some of those events live? I mean, on spring breaks and things like that. That's been kind of a major marker for audience members to look forward to those spring break days, either be there or to watch it.
That was we did our first spring break in the late 80s, and that was part of that thing about how we first reinvented MTV. And someone said, well, why don't we go on live from places like Fort Lauderdale or Daytona Beach? And we would send crews down there. Oh my God, they would get in trouble. It would be wild, and we'd be like locusts coming into a town. A couple of years with the MTV spring break, and the town elders we'd have to move somewhere else. But it was a great way to involve advertisers. The audience found it fascinating. I mean, everybody, in their fantasy thing, I want to go on spring break. It's been a long and lonely winter. So the idea, it became a great franchise for us.
Tell me about the relationship as you see it between TRL and like the advent of the boy bands and kind of the pop princesses. Do you think one spawned the other, or it was a coincidence, or?
Well, it came about at a time when the so-called Generation Y, sort of the young people who were born from they really embraced this sort of boy band thing, and like Britney Spears and the Backstreet Boys and all the rest of them really were sort of classic teen idols if you go back and think about how those patterns shaped up like in the 50s and the 60s. And very much in the choreography, it wasn't about musical integrity. It was a reaction to the grunge era, the kind of austere grunge era, and it was really embraced by a massive audience, so much bigger than the grunge thing ever was. That was the apex of the music industry. They never sold more music, and it was driven by so many of those coincident stars. That came about, and for us it was a heyday, but it did parallel exactly with Total Request Live, because remember, Total Request Live aired in the afternoon, and the only people who were really around to watch it on weekdays was pretty much junior high school age kids, so our average age was lower, but this was their music, their stars for that generation, and they kept making, and there was a lot of those bands were great, for what they were.
When Viacom acquired CBS in 1999, how did that impact you, and were you involved in that deal?
I wasn't so involved in it, other than I got a call on a summer day saying, I want you to stand by to do some due diligence. Mel Karmazin, we're talking about this kind of stuff kind of happened over my head in a way. I didn't know Sumner was planning on acquiring CBS, and then one day they said, well, Mel Karmazin's doing due diligence on the company. He'd like to spend a couple hours with you. I was in some vacation in some resort. I can't remember. It was in Hawaii or somewhere. But I laid out a whole floor worth of papers, and he just went through hours of questions about the business and everything. And evidently we passed the test because the deal went down. But that was a big change for us.
How did it impact MTV Networks?
Well, Mel came in as our boss, and Philippe Dumont and Tom Dooley, who had been sort of Sumner's deputies, they got fired, took a lot of money, and went away. Now we had to look at integrating ourselves with CBS and Blockbuster No, Blockbuster was part of the early one. Integrating CBS, who had two kind of failed cable networks, the Nashville Network and Country Music Television. They accrued to us, and it was our job to kind of rebuild them, turn them into something more viable, better business models. It took up a lot of energy. It was a real drain. The Nashville Network was a mess. It was really run on baling wire, essentially. A lot of odd franchises. It had been a big business that kind of fallen into disrepute. It wasn't really in our company culture, wheelhouse, doing something from Nashville, a C&D County appealing network, but we figured it out. We converted it to the National Network, and then to Spike TV. But that took a long time and a lot of energy. And Country Music Television, that was an easier thing, because that was a country music video channel, but it never got any license fees from affiliates, you see, so we had to spend a lot of time restructuring their deals with all the MSO, the cable operators and satellite operators, to try and get money for this service. So I would say for the early years it was a burden, because we had to take a couple of weak players and reinvigorate them, and with only a finite amount of energy, it meant less money and less time and effort on the workhorses of MTV and Comedy Central, on.
CMT still exists as a channel, right? CMT.
Yeah, it still does, and does well.
Is that run out of L.A. or it's Nashville?
Runs out of Nashville.
Okay, but is Spike here in L.A. though? Or?
Spike has offices in L.A. and New York. I
Okay.
think they work now under Doug Herzog, who also runs Comedy Central.
When 9/11 happened, did that affect MTV, and where were you? How did it affect you?
Well, I was home that day. I lived up on I had a townhouse on 66th Street. I remember being downstairs and my wife calling down and says, "Well, you're not going to believe what just happened. Some plane just flew into the World Trade Center," and then it all went from there. So that was a pretty intense time to be living in New York, to say the least. And for us, who were centered in Times Square, and with all the paranoia about successive terror attacks and whatnot, Times Square was thought to be, how hard would it be to blow off a bomb in Times Square or have some type of attack? So there was an awful lot of, it was just so depressing and devastating overall. But then there was the whole issue about employee morale and safety issues, and should I be feeling safe? I can remember one day we had Mayor Giuliani came to TRL, and we tried to be pitch in and be brave and be good New York City citizens, and we were. And I had to go down. I remember go to every floor and talk to every floor of people about what this meant, and we instituted all kinds of evacuation procedures, but there was that element of just fear. It lasted for a year or so. That was a big deal if you were a New York company.
In the next year, in 2002, another what many would consider a radical idea unfolded on MTV, the Osbournes. Here's Ozzy, and we're doing like a Ozzy and hair. The initial concept, what was that?
We had done some shows with Sharon Osbourne, some specials around one of the award shows or something, and Brian Graydon, who was then the head of programming, I think it was Brian. She said to Sharon Osbourne, your family is kind of whack. We could do a TV show just sticking a camera around and following you guys. And she says, why don't you do it? So that's how the Osbournes was born. There was no pilot process or anything like that. We went straight to series, and who knew? That just took off like a rocket. MTV was sort of set up for that stuff. We could strike gold, just almost by walking down and hitting our head against the wall, or something lands in your lap, or something would happen that quickly and easily. So the Osbournes became, huge deal.
And I guess it helped Ozzy. Or at least certainly helped him.
He's a columnist for Rolling Stone now, and all that whole family has benefited greatly, and they were fantastic.
With that, and before that, Real TV, the Real World, how would you say reality shows have impacted MTV?
The ones that MTV runs, or the ones that everyone else runs?
Well, I would say starting out with the ones that you all ran. And then just in general, in terms of a genre, since there are
Well,
others too.
For us, they were good because, but they were, as unlike the broadcast networks, which now have moved into reality programming because it's cheaper. For us to move into reality programming, that was more expensive. We were used to spending next to nothing. Yeah. So that all of a sudden to do the Osbournes, and all of a sudden in the second season, Ari Emanuel's representing the Osbournes. We're in a whole different world. But it, in the early days, we had sort of a monopoly on the reality show business. No one else was really doing it yet. I mean, the network said, "Oh man, that's like so cable. We're not touching it." And, now it has 50 subcategories, reality competition and this and that, reality fantasy. But so for us, it was really good. One could say that at some point in time, MTV got too clogged up with reality shows. I mean, I think people at MTV now would tell you that. It's just like one after the other. What happened to the music? What happened to other things? We got shows on everybody. Now they got a couple of great ones, Teen Mom these days, and Jersey Shore, getting higher ratings than I think any series in the history of the network.
And still certainly controversial.
Yeah. Some would say, well, they're lowering the bar. Are they chasing an ever lowering bar? You can have that argument. They're financially successful. What does it do for the image of MTV? I'm not sure. I'm not there anymore. Mm-hmm. But I would hypothesize that a glut of reality shows would turn off a certain part of the audience. While there still is a fascination as to watch people, the reality shows increasingly involve staged events. Then, we did The Hills. I mean, we took the reality show to another level with some kind of scripted stuff and casting people who look like TV stars and going into these fantasy locations like Laguna Beach. Mm-hmm. Those were hugely successful. So we kind of got more ambitious about them, and they were successful, and they still are, but a constant diet of them is not the greatest.
Was when Newlyweds, Nick and Jessica started with the same kind of thinking, the Osbournes, let's just go in and see what we can get? I mean, that was like in 2003.
Yeah, that was like Jessica Simpson was one of the pop princesses on MTV, so we had some meetings with her father, and next thing you know, we're doing a reality show. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you could move quickly.
We moved quickly. There was no... I can remember Doug Herzog was hired away at one point. He was hired away by Fox, and he went to Fox, and he lasted a short period of time running the Fox broadcast network. And he said one of the first days of work, they said, "Well, come on in, we got to go watch all these pilots. It's the end of its pilot season." He goes into a screening room at Fox. There's like 30 people in the room. He came out and he said, "Who are all those people?" He says, "All those people work for you." These are development executives. So we didn't have development executives, really. I mean, we had a couple of people. So they have since added them, and you've got that kind of bureaucracy that kind of creeps in whether you like it or not. But we were clearly able to. I mean, sometimes I'd be say something, or Judy, let's just do it, just get it on the air. Doesn't work, we'll get rid of it.
Well, the whole idea of how Ha was created. I mean, just like let's just
do it. That came out of one meeting.
Was there a moment, a defining moment from your point of view, where like MTV was not about music videos, it was more about all the other kinds of programming, reality program, or was it just a real gradual kind of change?
It was gradual. And in my own mind, I always believed that the heart and soul of MTV was music, and we had a certain kind of credibility we had to stand for. Maybe I was deluding myself after a while because, basically if you wanted higher ratings and more money, it meant less music videos. But everyone was there. The sort of legacy management who was there came to MTV for music. So it was hard to make some of these changes. But there was also this ambition we're going to be producers. We weren't going to use independent production companies, which were beginning to appear. But so there was a couple of different things pulling you in different directions, and then you'd always hear from people, "Man, MTV just isn't what it used to be," and say, "Well, this is what it is for people who are 23 years old now. I'm sorry, you're 40 years old, so who cares about you?" It was hard to argue with success, but at some point, I think you can begin to lose the thing that made you great.
As shocking as it sounds, those first MTV audiences are late 40s, maybe early 50s now. What from the early 80s, I guess.
Oh, say you were 15 when you started watching MTV in 1981, 91, 20.
45.
You're 45 years old.
So how have the audiences changed over the years?
I got people working there now that they weren't even born when we started. It's amazing. That would periodically creep up. It's like when you notice, my God, the policemen are younger than me. Then you realize, well, there's people working here, they weren't even born. Or there's somebody's kid who used to work here. I'm sorry, I forgot your original question.
How have the audiences changed through the years? That demo.
Well, they've become this multitasking, electronically literate group of people who have attitudes that are very much not like the baby boomers. I mean, they are not suspicious of authority. They like their parents. And, they don't seem to find music as a centerpiece of their life. Technology seems to be playing that role these days. I mean, the kind of music that we knew when we grew up with, when you really had a passion for it, that seems to be absent. Now, is that because MTV doesn't play music anymore, or is that because the culture has changed and Apple is the new music? I don't know. I mean, I think probably more the latter. I mean, it's social. There was a period in time where music meant something and people really cared about it. And if you look at the total history of recorded music, that was sort of the exception. Those years from the 60s through the the 90s. But the music industry has kind of vaporized because of their lack of foresight on how to deal with the onslaught of the digital revolution. And, I guess if you're a kid today, do you want to be in a rock band, or you got to walk in the design department of Apple or work for some website? It's like we saw at one point people didn't want, young kids didn't want to work for radio stations. That's where bright kids used to go. They wanted to be in the media business, music business, or they would work for record companies. Now no one's doing that. But while they would want to work at MTV, and now, I want to work for Hulu, or I want to work for Netflix. Those are like the cool places.
We talked about the beginnings of VH1. Was Behind the Music a defining moment for VH1?
Definitely. That embodied the new VH1. That I brought in John Sykes to recast VH1, which has kind of run its course and reinvent it. And Behind the Music was just fantastic, because it really took the story arc of all these bands, the rise, the fall, the resurrection. They did like 120 of them when I was there. I don't know how many they've done now, but they were great, great shows, and well produced, and something I think everyone was really proud of and really liked to watch.
Was there ever a problem with the identity of VH1? It seemed like originally it was like, well, here we got music for the older, like almost like a reaction you talked about.
It was a huge organizational issue. When we first started it, we didn't have a lot of money. We only had $3 million to launch it, so it was kind of the same people were working on both channels. So like, you never really got paid proper attention, never had respect. And at some point, they became the CEO. I said, we got to really change this. People came in my office one day and said, we got to kill VH1. The Nickelodeon people said, it's just, the sales guy said, we got to get rid of VH1 and close it down. It's costing us too much. It ain't worth it. I said, we're not going to do that. In fact, let's set up VH1 as a separate entity on its own P&L statement, and let's have people who are dedicated to work there, who are champions for it. That worked, but then there was always the fact, well, we're champions for VH1, but MTV gets all the attention. That's the favorite son. They get the money. You really don't like us. They don't want us to play this video. There's all this stuff went back and forth. How can we both play the same videos? Well, you can in certain ways. So there was always a lot of fights and arguments I had to moderate.
When was it clear to you that branding, MTV, basically creating other channels, MTV2, all the other variations of MTV, that was an important kind of step to take?
Well, when we knew that the cable capacity was going digital and we were going to the mega channel world, we decided, my God, if we don't soak up some shelf space, now, every Tom, Dick, and Harry is going to be running out with a channel, and they're going to, we're going to go from having a really powerful position in the 54 channel world to really being diminished in the 400 channel world. So we got a suite of channels we called the Suite, and we said we would do digital. Let's do digital spin-offs. Essentially, there was a thing called it was MTV Latin Service. There was a heavy metal channel. There was MTV2. We did a couple of Nickelodeon channels, which have subsequently become full channels in themselves. Spacing on the name of one, Noggin. So we put out a suite of 6 channels that basically kind of doubled our playing field in a sense, and then more after that, and went to the cable operators and secured shelf space for them. In the end, we converted one of them to Logo, which was a first gay network, and we would try and keep them out there as sort of placeholders and stalking horses till we had, and program them at very low cost, till we had a better idea that we thought we could put in place.
VH1, Video Hits 1, another name that doesn't sound like it's just kind of out there, created, but it has an identity now. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the evolution of VH1 to where it is today?
I haven't followed it really closely. It's had a bunch of cycles in its life, more extreme than MTV, and I think it's going through a bad cycle right now. I mean, it had some real PowerPoints when it moved behind the music, and they had several franchises that pop-up videos, and they really, they got heavily into reality. They got some dating shows, gratuitous shows. I think they lost a bit of image, and I think they're suffering for it now.
How do you feel? What was your reaction when you saw a show like Saturday Night Live spoof, behind the music? You get a kick out of that? Or
oh, we love that. When Saturday Night Live takes you on, that's fantastic. Validation and interesting. Yeah. And they were really always doing one cable network or another, which was interesting because on broadcast TV there'd never be a reference to cable. But the Saturday Night writers were young and they would write of it. So, they were BET or, NPR or any kind of odd little media outlet. They'd love to make fun of it.
When you chose shows for Nickelodeon, or the choices that were made, I thought it was just perception. I think it was true that Nickelodeon was really kicking the Disney Channel's ass at some point, in a way. Shows like Blue's Clues, SpongeBob, SquarePants. What led you to choose shows like that for Nickelodeon?
Well, belief in the instincts of our programming people. We thought they had such a run, and such a run really in excess of MTV as a financial performer and a ratings performer. And they inspired and got such loyalty. And, at one point Nickelodeon would command, 70% of the kids viewing on television. They'd command 60% of the revenue spent on kids on television. They were a monster. They could do no wrong. And then we would go into preschool programming, which had been kind of neglected with things like Blue's Clues. It was just a guy walked in and said, let's do stuff on a blue screen, create a show on a computer, basically, and it becomes a huge thing. Or Laura, or Dora the Explorer. These things became multi-billion-dollar plays when you count in the licensing and merchandising. SpongeBob, but we had a staff of people there who were just incredible and loyal and creative and with great instincts. All of them, they made so many great calls, such a great batting average. They really. That's a group of people that to this day, they really know their stuff. Great leadership.
What was the idea behind creating Nick at Night?
The idea was Nickelodeon went off the air at 9 o'clock, and we decided that if we didn't fill in that space, the cable operators would take it from us and put something else there as the channel world, as the world began to devolve. So we said, let's put something else there. What can we put there? So again, Fred Seibert, who I mentioned many times, we got $1 million. We said, look, let's get a bunch of like My Three Sons and those kind of old sitcoms that were then called reruns. You'd see them on independent stations. And let's put in between them, let's make it a place. Let's borrow what we've learned about packaging and promotion. And instead of making it a bunch of shows that just run together, we'll make it a place called Nick at Night, and it'll have an attitude and an ethos, and it'll be kind of a campy, ironic sort of presentation. And we spent $1 million, put it on the air. We took out that 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. time slot, and huge success. Nick at Night's still a top 10 rated channel if you're to look at it in cable.
How'd you go about selecting the shows? Were they part of the Viacom library, or just?
No, we would take some from the Viacom library. They tried to be agnostic about where stuff came from, and we would be able to get shows for $5,000-$10,000 an episode in the early days. But then people thought we were making money, and the prices went up. And then we would say, okay, let's take out the entire Mary Tyler Moore library over 7 years. We would make some ambitious moves to try and lock up product, as we saw that Nick at Night was a big business. It became such a big business that we said, let's do TV Land. We decided that on a day. Let's have a whole 24-hour channel that's based on, because the stuff in Nick at Night that was wearing out, we were replacing it with more modern sitcom comedies. Let's take that really old classic TV and make a network just for that. We launched that in 1996, 24 hours of TV Land. Again, it became a hugely successful network. And those networks, would trade. They'd be worth billions of dollars in terms of their asset value.
Did you see a plan at the beginning, like the beginnings of TV Land, where they'd be producing, original programming?
Well, we talked about that. Could we create sitcoms? And now in the vacuum of sitcoms, you see them doing it. And they seem to be having some success. I mean, in Body, that would be a natural progression. Just like the next logical, natural progression for MTV will be to do scripted shows, which are higher risk, but, you're now playing with the big boys. I'll just say one other ironic thing. I remember when we launched TV Land, we had a big party at Universal Studios out on one of the big sets, and Mr. Whipple came, because we would run a lot of the old TV commercials. So I got to meet Mr. Whipple, who in some ways was responsible for my whole career, which was quitting that business and leaving and trying something else.
Did you tell him that?
I don't remember.
A great story to tell him.
I don't remember.
Comedy Central. So how has that developed over the years since it was acquired, and what was the direction for it, the way you saw it?
Well, we had a great running joint venture when we had the joint venture with Time Warner, HBO. As Jeff Bucas and I, Jeff was then the head of HBO and I was the head of MTV Networks, and we worked out a great relationship, and it was very collegial, and we had a couple different leaders. And then, we decided to try and get more ambitious about what we were doing. The business always went up. We decided that one of the seminal moments was we need a place that really kind of like reflect that. We can't just be a canned TV network. We need a show that really would reflect the world and could comment on what's going on today. So we started The Daily Show. Started The Daily Show sometime '96, I guess, something like that, with Craig Kilborn, who was sort of a frat house, guy. But, it was comedy done on a topical basis, hired writers, set up a separate studio. And, it kind of was okay. It never hit its groove. But then Craig killed. The greatest thing happened to us, which is Craig Kilborn came to us one day after a couple of years on the air and said, I'm leaving to go to CBS. We were like, wow, he's going to the big time. He's going to be in late night. So what are we going to do? And we said, well, we had Jon Stewart, who had kicked around. We had done a Jon Stewart show on MTV that failed in the 80s. We had done a bunch of stuff with Jon. We liked Jon, and Doug Herzog was a big proponent of, let's give the show to Jon Stewart. And it took a couple of years for that to kind of gel and come into place, but it became what it is today, and of course spawned Stephen Colbert, and it's been this whole version of a sort of a comedy hothouse of people who've, Steve Carell. We've had all kinds of people come in and out of there.
How do you feel about the fact that millions, especially of younger viewers, go to The Daily Show to get their news, not just to be entertained?
I feel good. I feel good about that. It's And the show's grown in its appeal, and it's grown, I think, in its intelligence. And Jon Stewart takes it all very carefully, and he's become like this icon. It's so different from when he started. He was a stand-up comedian, but he's adapted and changed, and he's created this role. And it's one of the shows I'm proudest of to have been involved with all my years at Viacom.
And what about South Park? Is that sort of a natural evolution from like the Beavis and Butthead type shows?
Yeah, well, we were looking for, when we started Comedy Central, we didn't have a lot of subscribers. I mean, that was one of the problems. Even after we merged with Home Box Office, we were at the 25 million rather mark, and someone came in with South Park and said, look at this. This is great. There were 6 episodes. We bought it. We put it on the air. We were able to take it up to like 55, 60 million subscribers based on the phenomena alone that show created. Now, who would imagine that it would still be in place, that those guys, Matt and Trey, would have a hit on Broadway these days, and South Park would become such an institution? It became their career. I mean, we just said, look, let them do it their own way, set it up, keep them paying more money. This is a great thing. They like it. It got to a place where people wouldn't automatically leave us. Like Jon Stewart could have left and taken a late night show. He was romance with that, saying, we will pay you more money and you have creative freedom here. You don't have to worry about a lot of that stuff. And that there's some big, we have a lot more leeway for success. And people have stayed with Comedy Central, over the years, and have been happy and content and have had a powerful impact.
In 2004, you were promoted to co-president of Viacom with Les Moonves. Why were there co-presidents?
There were co-presidents because I think they just didn't make there was Les wasn't going to work for me, I wasn't going to work for him. There was a big operation. Maybe we could, everyone always referred to the Terry Semmel, Bob Daly era on how two people could actually run something. Could we really get along? And, I got along with Les, and really we each ran our own respective businesses, and it was okay. We would meet and try and coordinate, and it was not an acrimonious relationship, and we had a couple of good years. And it was sort of was the predecessor for the split of the company of Viacom, and what was a frustrating time for Redstone and others on Wall Street about our stock price and performance. And, it was the rise of the tech stocks, and the media stocks weren't doing great. So ultimately, after a couple of years, there was a decision to split Viacom in two, and Les and I each ran our own little well, they weren't little, they're our own businesses.
How would you describe him as personally and professionally?
Les is a master. I mean, he is really a hard-driving, hard-working guy with great instincts. He's got a good sense of humor. He's a perfect guy. He's made for the form of broadcast television. Well, I think we both realized how different our relative businesses were. The broadcast, the brawly word of broadcast, and we kind of came up, as I said, on the alleyway, trying to figure out how do we stay out of those guys' way and invent our own little businesses with our little card tricks. But we would make so much more money than CBS. I mean, we were at the end of the day, we were making $3 billion a year, and CBS for making a lot more money on the top line had a very small margin on the bottom line. But I've got to say, in all these years where Jeff Zucker and everybody would run down broadcast television, I mean, Les was always there saying, man, it is the greatest. There's nothing like broadcast television. He was the champion for the whole category. And, they've done a great job to this day. And I'm still good friends with Les.
So Les was running CBS, and you were running Paramount and
I
MTV
ran
networks?
Paramount. I ran Paramount. I ran Simon & Schuster. No, we both ran everything. But we had our areas of speciality. Okay. So there was, I'm trying to remember, we had Simon & Schuster, world's biggest publisher. We had Showtime Networks. We had a radio group that was huge, the biggest radio, Infinity Radio, huge radio company. We had various syndication businesses, King World, the MTV networks. We had BET. It was a pretty big conglomerate.
But was it pretty clear who would run what in terms of the split, the dividing?
Yeah, and then we had to really kind of split everything up, and as we each went in our own separate ways.
Did when Redstone decided to split Viacom into two entities, broadcast and cable, the split that happened in 2006, I guess. How did you feel about that?
Well, I guess from one level, Les and I were each happy to have our own companies to run. It was a very complicated process to pull everything apart, decide which goes where. So it was liberating in a sense. I mean, I think the calculus for doing it, which was we're going to have a growth stock and a sort of a value stock, should be a case study in Harvard for what not to do. To arrange your company and modify and reorganize it on the basis of the relative appeal of a stock. When you see these stocks now come and go, they're up and they're down, was really it was like the tail wagging the dog. Mm-hmm. So I think the split of Viacom in retrospect was not a wise thing. We're better off divesting some businesses and streamlining it. I'm not a big fan of the big media conglomerate anyway, but the split of the company had made things, I think, unnecessarily costly, complicated, and, if everyone had to do it all over again, they probably wouldn't do it.
How did it affect you in your position?
Well, I became now the CEO of a public company for the first time. I was a COO of the public company, a co-COO with Les. That was very manageable. It was like training wheels for being the CEO. But for now, I'm beginning to deal with investors. Mm-hmm. I'm beginning to deal with the government and policy decisions and things I wasn't really used to doing. I was spending a lot of time on acquisitions and financial performance, and it really took me further away from, I guess, the things I like to do the most, which was the programming and marketing. But I said, you know what, I've been doing that for 20 some odd years. This is an interesting thing. I got into it. I can be competitive at it. And I said, it's a great honor to run one of these big companies. And I was trying to adjust in doing it. I thought I was doing a fair job. We had one bad quarter, which I think out of all my years since 1987 as a CEO, we had one bad quarter. And then I got fired. I got fired in September after only being on the job 8 months, fired by Redstone. So that was a bit of a shock, to say the least. And off I went. That was a real, it turns out everyone would say that there's blessings, and when one door closes, another door opens. It turns out it was a good thing for me, because in retrospect, I realized I was 26 years on the same treadmill, and I could have a third career chapter in my life, which I've been on.
Were there any disagreements really with Redstone about decisions, or was it just pretty much, did you see it as pretty much just kind of bottom line that ultimately?
Well, he disagreed with me about, I disagreed with him about he got on his high horse one day and fired Tom Cruise.
Right.
Which, he didn't even work for us. He had a production company at the studio. And I said, this is Brad Gray's role, who I had installed as the head of Paramount. This is not my role. And, that's no way to treat a guy, to humiliate him, who's been such a productive member of our society. Stuff isn't done like that in Hollywood. There's no reason to. We had huge shouting matches over that. And then a couple of weeks later, I got fired. There was a lingering, I really had pushed back on him, and there was a lingering resentment about MySpace. We were trying to move into the digital world, and MySpace was bought by Murdoch, and we had been talking to MySpace and didn't buy it. And he went on Charlie Rose and basically said, I was, I didn't want to buy MySpace, and he hates being bested by Murdoch, and it was quite something to see.
So do you feel any vindication looking at what happened to MySpace?
Well, I'm still waiting for a thank you note, which I don't think will be coming. Yes, it's been not that you hate to see any business go down the tubes, but you can look at some of those social networks, sort of like we used to think, they're like a trendy restaurant. They can be really hot. If you get into a club, you don't have to pay anything to enter. You can leave easily. Now, Facebook just beat the hell out of them because they had a better formula. So, yeah, but, it's all, I had the most wondrous time in career there. It was an amazing time.
So what did you do immediately before launching Act 3?
I got on a plane and went to Burma with my wife and my mother-in-law and my brother and a couple of friends. It's a country that I really enjoyed, and we have an orphanage that we run way up in the jungle there, and I figured the best thing to do is to get out of town, don't read anything. And it's funny, I touched down in Singapore, and then you just get far away, you realize, that whole world, it's like you take a beat, and you realize that whole world was then, and whatever they're saying, who cares? I got my life, I should feel good, and I'm gonna let things come into focus and figure out what I'm gonna do next. So a great place to go is to go to a place that I loved and tune out. And there's no cell phones, there's no internet, and I spent a lot of time in the jungles in Burma. And then I began to realize that rather than do one next big thing, it might be more interesting to do, because I had a lot of offers for different things, and I have a lot of interests over and above the world of television. And I said it would be interesting to do several things with people I like and things that I'm interested in. And why not? If I can kind of cover now my annual living costs through some consultantships and so forth, I don't really care about trying to build some huge financial bankroll. I'd rather do something interesting. So my goal became, how do I have an interesting life? And that's what I've been embarked on for the last 5 years. It's been interesting, I got to say.
Did you spend much time kind of putting the spotlight on yourself and thinking, what could I have done differently? Or did you just decide, I'm just going to move forward?
I don't think I would have done anything differently. No, I thought I got to say that to be running a public company and have one bad quarter after 20 some odd years of great performance, it's his prerogative. He obviously felt that I wasn't the right guy. But I don't really go back and think, oh, I wish I had done something else, because I don't really have any misgivings for, oh, of course you made some bad decisions. But, I mean, in general, no. I don't have any thing that I thought I did fundamentally wrong.
Are you? How do you feel about? I'm assuming it's a pride in the fact that MTV or the networks are in like 164 countries worldwide.
It's a great source of pride. That was a whole great adventure, the whole international rollout. That was a lot of fun, it was really something I cared a lot about personally. I was able to take MTV back to India, where I kind of got my start, so that was a real kick. And I would say that my early experiences in traveling gave me the kind of confidence and to hire certain people and go places, because we were a real trailblazer on the internationalization of networking front.
Was there, would you say there's a defining moment for you at MTV?
At MTV Networks or at MTV?
Either.
Defining in what sense?
Something you thought was something that you were able to have charge of or take charge of that changed either the face of television or had an impact that either you didn't expect or you planned. I mean, just something that was...
Well, I think when I became the general manager of MTV, and for the first time I was in charge of the whole business, and it was charged with recasting how to reinvent the channel and setting up teams to figure out how to do that and pulling it off. It gave me a great sense of, what you can do if you put your mind to it, and how a creative organization can function and thrive and, make changes when it needs to and be innovators. So that informed a lot of what I did later on in my career. I was also, I don't know if there was a moment or not. There must have been. I had some moments. We would have town halls in like a theater nearby, and I would go out on stage and just answer questions from the audience, and they'd want to know this, that, and the other thing. I guess it isn't a moment, but there was a very good esprit de corps in that company. It had a really good, strong culture, and I was always really proud of that. I would stand back sometimes, I suppose, at a big music video award or at some event we do in Europe, and I would be in awe that I'm actually able to do this, and that I'm running an organization that's pulling this off. So there was a lot of awe-inspiring moments. I feel like so lucky to have had a career that spanned so many different kinds of things and places, and it was wonderful.
So you're back here in entertainment. You're working with Oprah Winfrey, the OWN network. How did that come about?
Well, when I was in Burma, Oprah called me. There's no cell phones there, and I got a message at this hotel. There's, a barely good hotel that Oprah Winfrey called. I thought this is some kind of joke. I don't even know Oprah Winfrey. So she called me and said, I'd like to meet with you. You ever think about running my company? And I said, no, I never thought about that. I don't know you. She says, I said, I'm in Burma. When you come back, come on up to Montecito, and I'll make you breakfast or lunch. And I drove up there and spent some time with her, and she told me about what she was planning on doing. And at that time, they were just about to announce the OWN joint venture with Discovery. So I started working with Oprah. That was one of many things I was doing. I've had a really good relationship with her. She's fantastic. That's been a business with its challenges.
What kind of challenges?
Well, there's creative challenges, management challenges, getting off and getting into the right groove challenges. But I still do believe that the idea for this network is a good, strong one. And we've had some, it's hard to go on and start a 168-hour network without any library, without being able to take off net programming and giving yourself a head start. So everything is original programming. But we'll get there.
What do you think you've been able to contribute so far?
Well, I've helped shape the strategies for their affiliate deals, for organizing the company, for certain hires, for mentoring or trying to mentor some of the executives there. It's a different role for me being a consultant rather than being in charge, so that takes some adjusting.
Do you have a vision for, let's say, 5 years down the road, how OWN will look?
Yeah, I think it'll look pretty damn good. I mean, it'll be well run and well managed, and they'll have some signature shows. You know, she gets off her syndicated show now. I know we're doing a tape, but I mean, this is 2011. Her syndicated show ends her 25-year run in a month or two. So her full attention will now go to the network. When she's doing this show, it's all consuming 150 episodes of that a year. So we've kind of started on in a way without a lot of input from Oprah. So having her on full time, that's going to be a huge change.
Yeah, and I hear people, I mean, fans, they want to, like you can't have enough Oprah, it seems like, the more that she's in, either on air or involved.
Well, I think there's probably a point where you're overexposed. I mean, the idea be it's more like the magazine. She's on the cover, she's on the back page, and but her worldview informs what's on that network. And, I think we're finding out what kind of stuff works and what kind of stuff doesn't.
It made a big splash January 1st. The numbers have fallen off somewhat. Is that a concern or just sort of like a normal course of,
We kind of thought that would happen. And, there was a great curiosity about what the network was about. And the numbers have fallen off, but they're beginning to come back now and gain traction. I mean, look, you can't, it's like playing pin the tail on a donkey to come up with to kind of program a network like this without being on the air and having audience feedback and getting, ratings results and stuff and finding out, you don't know where to adjust, what to move, what to green light. So now we know a lot more just by being on the air. So this first year was sort of a practice year because she can't be on until January. And, we've got a lot of very talented people working and I think very good things in the pipeline.
What role do you see that you played in the growth of the cable TV industry?
Well, I think that our networks, the MTV networks, which for a long time comprised about 25% of the viewing of cable, we introduced very refined, very well programmed, and innovatively positioned networks that sort of defined what a cable network could be. And I will go back to when that man gave me that interview in 1980 about what he saw the future of TV being, which is these specialized channels for specialized audiences with a very clear identity. This is exactly what we did, and we took advantage of a lot of bobs and weaves in the road in terms of growth, and I think we maneuvered the storms pretty well, and it's a powerhouse of a company today, something I get great satisfaction for. And we had like a fraternity of people. We had the ESPN guys, there was the CNN guys, there was A&E. We all kind of created the business together. So in many ways, your competitors were your friends because it would be hard to have created the cable networking business on your own. The idea that there was a lot of different choices coming up simultaneously made the advertising marketplace happen, made the cable, made the consumer take more attention. So it was sort of a collective effort in a way.
When you look at television today, what's your biggest criticism?
Well, I think in many ways TV's having its best golden age. There's a lot of crap on there, but if you think the action for me creatively has kind of moved from film to television. I mean, the big stuff, you think you got Mad Men, the great series on HBO, you got Breaking Bad. There's so many interesting and creative series on television. And now we have the ability to program it ourselves with TiVo. And, you can really be your own programmer. That other maxim, which is the role of the consumer, will just only get better and better in terms of controlling what they want to watch, when they want to watch. You kind of have it now. And it's only going to get better as IPTV gets plugged in into these new TV sets. But I think...
what do you watch?
I don't watch a lot of TV. I watch certain series. I mean, I still watch The Daily Show religiously, 60 Minutes. I watch news and information programming. I like Nat Geo. I like documentaries. I've never watched network television primetime. I mean, I hate to admit that because I've just never gotten into sitcoms. I mean, I never watched one episode of Friends all those years.
What advice would you give to an aspiring TV executive?
Get your hands dirty, learn as much as you can. It depends what kind of executive you want to be. Do you want to be a producer? Do you want to be a development executive? Do you want to be what? But I would try and go for a job where you can learn many skills simultaneously. The business got very compartmentalized and very stratified, and it's nothing like the free field running we had back in the 80s or even the 90s. But it's still, if I were to look for a job in the media industry, television ain't going away. Television's getting better and better. And it's a good as good a time to get into it, and it's still the most flourishing sector in the media and entertainment world.
How would you like to be remembered?
As a great leader who helped create a wonderful culture, and we were able to create from our wits networks that really rose to the top and succeeded based on creativity and innovation. That it was, ran a very successful creative business that was a creative first business.
Great. Tom Freston, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Wow, that was well. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Great interview.
It was a real